Hi, everybody. So, I am filming a reading wrap-up for my general TBR for July and August, and my thematic TBR wrap-up will be out on August 18th. So first, let's start off with rereads. My first reread is Never Met a Duke Like You by Amali Howard. I read this back in May or June, and I'm rereading it because last month rewatched Clueless, and the review for that can be found in our July entertainment review video on Matt's channel. So this is a modern retelling of the movie Clueless and the classic book Emma by Jane Austen. I am rereading this because the first 3 discussion questions are centered around comparing the characters in the book to the characters in the movie Clueless. And now that I have seen the movie, I can effectively answer the questions. So I will probably do a separate review video for this specific book so I can talk about the comparisons to Clueless. The thing that I like the most about this book is that the author, Amali Howard, wrote a Regency princess that is neurodivergent. And as I said before in my other videos, I am neurodivergent, which means I have a disability that is similar to autism, but I am not actually autistic. The second reread that I'm going to be reading this month is In the Time of the Butterflies by Julia Alvarez. I read this book before I moved to Maine, but I originally first read it when I was in high school in World Studies class with Steve Dreher and Dick Miller, and I am remiss because I left it off my TBR for do my opinions of the books that I read in school hold up? And right now, I am on page 148, and I remember really liking this book when I was in high school, and I still really like it. And I like the fact how it's about like strong women who are standing up for their rights. And I think this is an important book for people to reread during an election year where so many things are on the line, including women's reproductive rights. So I would suggest giving this book a read. The next book that I'm rereading is called The Daughter of Sherlock Holmes. Again, this is another book that I read before I moved to Maine. I think I read it in 2021 or 2020 during COVID. And as the book implies, it's about as the title of the book implies, this story is about the daughter of Sherlock Holmes solving a modern day mystery, and it's very good so far. I am currently on page 216, chapter 17. Oh, that's not a reread. I mixed up my piles. The next reread that I'm reading is It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. I'm also reading the second book in the series, Hook, Line, and Sinker, which I borrowed from Kathleen today when I went over her house to listen to the audiobook for The Picture of Dorian Gray. And I will update you guys on that at the end of this video because I have comments, like small comments. So this book is definitely Schitt's Creek inspired. I mean, the author mentions it in the author's note that Piper, the main female character, was inspired by Alexis Rose. So kudos to Tessa Bailey because I love Alexis. She's my favorite character on Schitt's Creek. And I think if her actress, Annie Murphy, read this book, she would really like the author's interpretation of Alexis. So I read this book back in the winter time because it helped me get my mind off the cold weather and the snowstorms. And obviously what I liked about it was the fact that it was Schitt's Creek inspired. And I liked the slow burn relationship buildup between Brandon and Piper. The next book in this duology is about Hannah and Fox. Hannah is the younger sister of Piper from the first book. I will be probably starting this book on Monday as a palate cleanser between books that I am reading and reviewing. I decided to pick up a couple of poetry books from the library this week. This one is by Edna St. Vincent Millay, Selected Poems. I am currently on page 147. This book is not being recorded on Goodreads because I'm reading it for fun and not to review it for YouTube. The next book is Queen Bee. So this is by the same person who wrote Her Majesty's Royal Coven, but instead of being about witches and wizards, this is about, well, it's still about a witch. It's about a witch version of Anne Boleyn, the wife of Henry VIII. So this, I don't know if this author, Juno Dawson, has ever heard of Six the Musical, but maybe that's why she was inspired to write this book, if she has heard of Six the Musical, because basically, for those who have not seen Six the Musical or heard of it, that book is a musical about the six wives of Henry VIII, and I have not seen it yet. I've just listened to the cast album, and the music is fantastic. And before I moved to Maine last year, I was in a writing group at the Plus Company, and we were actually writing a historical fiction story that's set in the same time as Six. Of course, because I moved away, the writing group kind of split apart, and I didn't hear from the person who was leading it after a while. Like, I was still continuing to write my chapters for my character, but I never heard from any other people. So, Shannon, if you're watching this video, please let me know if you're interested in starting it up again, because reading this book is really making me think of the story we were writing, and I would love to work on that with you guys again if you guys are interested. This book is called Theater of Marvels by Lee Ann Dillsworth, and this was on a new fiction show at the library, so I decided to pick it up because it's about theater. And let me read you the description. Unruly crowds descend on Silic's Variety Theater. The young mixed-race actress Zilith is headlining tonight as the great Amazonian, a savage queen from the darkest Africa. Zilla, an orphan from the slums of Victorian London, knows that her rise to stardom is her ticket to freedom, and she hopes to high society. The absurd caricature of her role, along with the leers of drunken audience, are simply the price she's willing to pay. Zilla's late mother made her promise to make a better life for herself, and now she's on the verge of attaining everything she's dreamed of. But when Krlik's newest black actress suddenly disappears, Zilla is haunted by worry. Can she risk her own neck to save this troubled stranger? A reckless pursuit of the truth takes Zilla into the underbelly of the city, for gaslit streets to the sumptuous parlors of Mayfair, as she seeks help from both rich admirers of the great Amazonian and notorious criminals from her past, where she will quickly find herself torn between two powerful worlds. A stunning and deliciously immersive debut. Lee Ann Dillsworth's The Theater of Marvels is a riveting journey across Victorian London and an unforgettable tale of race identity and a woman's reclamation of her fate. So, 2 words in this description stand out to me. They are deliciously immersive and riveting. I have been unable to put this book down since I got it out of the library yesterday, and I am already on page 89. The next book I'm going to talk about today is a new release that has been on my wait list at the library since it first came out in April, and I finally picked it up on Tuesday afternoon. The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. For those who are not familiar with Leigh Bardugo, she also wrote Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom, which I read in April, and Wonder Woman Warbringer, which is a modern-day retelling of Wonder Woman, which I read in May. I love her books. They are so fantastic, and I love this one just the same. This is a historical fiction / fantasy book that's set in Spain. And I will read you the description. In a shabby house on a shabby street in the new capital of Madrid, Lucia Cortada uses scraps of magic to get through her days of endless toil as a scullion. But when scheming mistresses discover that the lump of a servant cowering in the kitchen is actually hiding a talent from little miracles, she demands Lucia use those gifts to better the family's social position. What begins as simple amusement for nobility takes a perilous turn when Lucia garners the notice of Antonio Perez, the disgraced secretary of Spain's king. Still reeling from the defeat of his armada, the king is desperate for any advantage in the war against England's heretic queen, and Perez will stop at nothing to regain the king's favor. Determined to seize the one chance to better her fortune, Lucia plunges into a world of seers and alchemists, holy men and hucksters, where the lines between magic, science, and fraud are never certain. But as her notoriety grows, so does the danger that her Jewish blood will doom her to the Inquisition's wrath. She will have to use every bit of her wit to survive and will to survive, even if that means enlisting the help of Gullion Santiago, an embattled, immortal familiar who knows secrets could prove deadly for them both. So the next book was recommended to me by Jordaline Reads, and it is called When Women Were... Oh, sorry, I forgot to say where I am in the Familiar. Right now, I am like 50% through or a little bit over, and I am on page 280. The next book I wanted to talk about, as I was just starting to say, was recommended to me by Jordaline Reads. It is called When Women Were Dragons by Kelly Branhill, and I will read you the description. Alex Green is a young girl in a world much like ours, except for its most seminal event, the mass dragoning of 1955, when hundreds of thousands of ordinary wives and mothers spread their wings, scales, and talons, left a trail of fiery destruction in their path, and took to the skies. Was it their choice? What will become of those left behind? Why did Alex's beloved aunt Marla transform, but Alex's mother did not? No one knows. It's taboo to speak of it. Forced into silence, Alex nevertheless must face the consequences of this astonishing event. A mother more protective than ever, an absentee father, their upsetting insistence that her aunt never ever existed, and wishing her beloved cousin Beatrice becomes dangerously obsessed with the forbidden. In this timely and timeless speculative novel, award-winning author Kelly Bramhill boldly explores rage, memory, and the tyranny of forced limitations. When Women Were Dragons exposes a world that wants to keep a woman small and their lives, their prospects, and examines what happens when they rise en masse and take up the space they deserve. So, like in the Time of the Butterflies, this fantasy book seems to be like about powerful women, and like this book has less to do with politics than than In the Time of the Butterflies. But if you're looking for a fantasy book that features strong women, I would recommend this book. And thank you, Jordaline, for the recommendation. Now, back to my wrap-up from last month and what's on my current TBR. Nope, that's not it. Updated new releases. I'll get to that in a minute. Oh, I can start with that first, actually, because that counts. Okay, so I'm going to talk about anticipated new releases next, because there are quite a few of those this month. For those who don't know, so I was in a writing group at Panera Bread earlier this year that had to disassemble because the person who was running it could not run it anymore. But in that writing group, my best friend Kate was sharing a manuscript for a book that she was working on, and it was recently published. So I'm very excited for her. Her pen name is Callista Black, and her book is called People We'd Rather Forget. It came out on Tuesday, and I'm super excited to get my hands on a copy when I see her next week. Assuming she'll have one for me. I'm not sure if she will. Oops. The next new release I'm looking forward to in the first half of this month is A Sorceress Comes to Call by T. Kingfisher. I read Sword Heart last month. It was on my TBR of books that were recommended to me by Sarah without an H and Riley Marie. And my review for that book will be in the video that is coming out on the 18th. So you don't have much longer to wait for that video. 9 more days. So I'm very excited to read T. Kingfisher's next book because it is another fantasy book. And I really love Sword Heart, and I'm looking to read a few of her horror books in October for Halloween. The next book that I am looking forward to for a new release for the first half of the month is Assistant to the Villain by Anna Nicole Mahar. I read her first book. Sorry, Assistant to the Villain was the first book. The new book that's coming out is called Apprentice to the Villain. So Assistant to the Villain is about Evie, who becomes the assistant to the villain. I can't remember what the villain's name is because I haven't read this book since March. But I'm so excited for the sequel to come out to see what happens next in the story of Evie and the villains she has fallen in love with, and I can't wait to see if there are any new characters. So the villain in this book, it is similar to Hades from Hercules, I think. So I think that this book is supposed to be like a Hades and Persephone retelling. That's just my guess. Speaking of Greek mythology, my next anticipated release for the first half of August is called Hera by Jennifer Saint. I read a few other books by Jennifer Saint. One of them was Atalanta, which I read in the wintertime. And I just really love how Jennifer Saint modernizes Greek mythology characters for present day. And I'm really excited to read Hera. The next book is Joy by Danielle Steele. So Danielle Steele was an author I got into a couple of years ago because when I went back to Plus Company after COVID-19 shut things down, Fran would leave books for me to read at the front desk for when things got slow on the phone. And I read a lot of books by Danielle Steele and Nicholas Sparks during that time. And I really fell in love with both of their writing. I'm very excited for Danielle Steele's new release because I've been rereading her backlist recently, and I just love her writing. One book that I really loved by her is called Second Act, which is about a screenwriter who falls in love with an actress in one of his movies. And that book was really good, and I liked the dynamic between the two characters. Stop shutting down on me, yo. All right. The next new release I'm looking forward to for the first half of this month is Not for the Faint of Heart by Lex Croucher. Lex Croucher wrote this amazing King Arthur retelling that I read in June for Pride Month called Gwen and Art Are Not in Love, which is basically Guinevere and Arthur, but Guinevere is lesbian. So I thought that book was great, so I can't wait to see how the relationship dynamic between the characters in this author's new book comes out. The next book that I'm looking forward to is You Will Never Be Me by Jessie Q. Sutanto. This is the same author as the Aunties mystery trilogy. And I'm really excited for this new murder mystery that is a standalone book by Jessie Q. Sutanto because I really love her writing. And the final book that comes out for the first half of August is By Any Other Name by Jodi Picoult. I have loved Jodi Picoult's books for a long time. Especially My Sister's Keeper, which has a really good movie adaptation with Abigail Breslin from Little Miss Sunshine. I am looking forward for her latest book to come out on August 20th. So some books I read in July that I wanted to talk about in this wrap-up were The Bear and the Nightingale, which is a book that I borrowed from my friend Kate, and it's like a fairy tale retelling that's based from the folklore of Polish people, I want to say, and I really enjoyed the build-up of the relationships of the characters, and I can't wait to read the next book in this 3-book trilogy by... What's the author's name? I have it over here. Catherine Arden. The next book I wanted to talk about was Late Bloomer by Maisie Eddings. This is another backdated new release that came out at the beginning of April. I really loved it. It's a sapphic romance book between two people who work in a flower shop, and I just loved the build-up and the ups and downs of their relationship and how they work through them. And I gave that book 4.5 stars on Goodreads. Oh, I haven't even been talking about my ratings for the books that I finished reading. The Bear and the Nightingale got 4 stars. The next book I wanted to talk about was Sandwich, which is set in modern day and is... Excuse me, I'm sorry. So, this book is about a middle-aged mother and her family, and it's set on Cape Cod, and it's basically about a mother who is growing older, and she's reminiscing a lot about, like, her kids growing up, because one of them is about to get married. So I think this book is most relatable to my life because I grew up going to a beach house in Hull, Massachusetts. That's where I was just on vacation last week. I just came back from vacation on Friday last week, and I go there every summer, twice a summer, once with my family for vacation and once for my family reunion for the 4th of July. So what I really liked about this book sandwich is that it really made me feel reminiscent of all of the times I had growing up down Hull. And I actually wanted to recommend this book to the rest of my family because it will make you think of Hull. The next book I wanted to talk about was Mexican Gothic, which is a horror novel that was recommended to me by Jordaline Reads. I've had a mixed relationship with horror since the beginning of the year when I first started to read Stephen King's books. But what I liked about Mexican Gothic is that it's historical fiction, which is my favorite genre, mixed with horror. And this is set in 1950s Mexico. And it's about a girl who goes to visit her cousin who's having, like, marital problems. And basically they are investigating strange goings-on at her cousin's mansion, which is supposedly haunted. And this book had me on the edge of my seat the whole entire time I was reading it. And I love the way it wrapped up. I'm not giving any spoilers, so I gave Mexican Gothic 5 stars because of the setting and how engrossed I was in the mystery plot. This author who wrote Mexican Gothic is also coming out with a new book this month. I think it's on August 8th, which was yesterday. So I'm excited to read that book too, but I haven't added it to my want to read list yet. A book I just finished reading yesterday was Beautiful Boy by David Sheaf. Destiny Sidwell raved about this on her YouTube channel. She recently reviewed it in her July wrap-up video, and I picked it up because of her, so thank you, Destiny. I gave this book 4 stars. It is by a journalist who has a son who is a drug addict, and it is basically his side of the story about his son's battle with addiction and his challenges with staying sober. What attracted me to this book was, as people know, I have read Matthew Perry's memoir twice and listened to the audiobook once. And I decided to pick up Beautiful Boy because I wanted to see a parent's perspective of addiction. Because, I mean, Matthew Perry's memoir was great because it showed about what his experience was like over the years he was on Friends with dealing with his addiction problem and how his family helped him through it, specifically his dad, because his dad helped him a lot. And one thing that really stood out to me about Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing was how Matthew Perry talked about how close his relationship with his dad was. And the father-son relationship is very strong in this book too, and you can tell how much David Schiff cares about his son Nick, and it was very powerful and emotional, and much like Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing, I was pretty much moved to tears by the end of it. I gave Beautiful Boy 4.5 stars. Please note that any star ratings that I give memoirs are truly subjective opinions because it's really hard for us book reviewers. A lot of people like Destiny and Sarah and Rachel Catherine say that it's hard for them to rate memoirs because it's hard to really give a rating on somebody else's life. And I mean, I agree with them. So that's why any star ratings I give to memoirs are truly subjective opinions. But all stories in these memoirs are very powerful. And one memoir I'm looking forward to reading is this book that I'm going to borrow from my friend Kathleen after I finish Hook, Line, and Sinker. That is called, now I don't remember the title, but it's about this Paralympian from Russia who got a disability because she had troubles in utero due to the Chernobyl explosion in the 70s. So I'm excited to read that. And also, one of my high school classmates, Tracy O'Neill, came out with a memoir on June 25th called Woman of Interest, which is a detective-style memoir that she wrote based on her experience with going to Korea to find her birth mother. So I'm very excited to read her memoir. Is this it? I wish I didn't have so many TBR list documents. Oh, July TBR. Good. Here we go. Okay, so, some other books that I wanted to talk about that I didn't mention in my thematic TBRs video that I'm going to be doing on the 18th are, A Tempest of Tea, which is a historical fiction that was mentioned in the TBR, the Taylor Swift coded TBRs video that These Lyrics and Lines did back in April. And I did not like this book as much as they did because the varying POVs made things confusing and I could not stand the main character. So if you don't like the female character, if you're not going to like the lead character, you're not going to like the book. That's what I've learned in my process of reviewing books. Another memoir that I read last month was called Born a Crime, which I heard about on Jack Edwards' YouTube channel. And this book is by Trevor Noah, who's a South African comedian. And he talks about in his biography growing up during the 1980s during apartheid. And I thought that was really interesting because I remember briefly discussing that when I was in middle school, especially when we were talking about the AIDS virus. But we didn't really talk about apartheid in very deep, heavy detail. So that's what made Trevor Noah's biography, Born a Crime, so interesting to me. And I would highly recommend it. The next book that I read in July that I wanted to talk about is called Gathering Blue. This is the second book in the series with The Giver in it. The Giver is part of my books I read in high school, books I read in school do my original opinions hold up TBR. And this book talks about a different family who lives in the same community as Jonah. And again, just like The Giver, it's very interesting how the people and families live in this dystopian society. And Lois Lowry's writing is just so engaging. And as I mentioned in my video where I reviewed The Giver, my favorite part of The Giver was when The Giver is telling Jonah about his relationship with Rosemary, and I think the flashback scenes between them are very sweet. So I gave The Giver and Gathering Blue 4 stars. I also gave Born a Crime 4 stars. The next book that I read last month was called House of Hunger. This is another recommendation I got from Jordaline Reads, and I could not get into it. I felt the pacing was too slow, and I felt the same way about The Hacienda, which is another horror book that I read. So this is the case where horror doesn't agree with me, and I can't really get into it. Another book I read last month is Life's Too Short by Abby Jimenez, which is the 3rd book in the Friend Zone series. Now, the Part of Your World series, 4 stars all the way through. The Friend Zone series, mixed ratings all the way through. The Friend Zone got 2.5 stars. Happy Ever After Playlist got 4 stars. And Life's Too Short got 4.5 stars. We made the recipe from Life's Too Short, which is chicken and rice soup, yesterday, and we gave the recipe 8 out of 10. What I really liked about Life's Too Short is the disability representation, because the main female character, Vanessa, has ALS, or Lou Gehrig's disease, and I really love how her boyfriend Adrian takes care of her. Another thing that this book touches on is drug addiction, and I thought that was handled really nicely in this book, because Vanessa's older sister is addicted to heroin. So basically, like, while Vanessa is dealing with her own disability, she's also dealing with her sister's drug addiction, and she has to basically adopt her niece, Grace, because her sister can't take care of her. So as I said in my other video, I really want Abby Jimenez to write a series of books that focus on the families of the kids in her books. Adrian, Vanessa, and Grace in Life's Too Short. Jacob, Brianna, and their family from Yours Truly. And my prediction is that Justin and Emma from Just for the Summer will eventually get married and have kids. And I would also like to see, like, where the relationship with Jason and his siblings comes in. So I want Abby Jimenez to write a book that focuses on all of these characters' families and their kids growing up. Because what I like the best about the ending of the Things We Hide from the Light by Lucy Score, the final book of the Knockabout series, was the fact that there was a epilogue set 10 years later, and Waylay, the daughter of Knox Naomi, is married and has a kid. So that's why I really want to see, like, the dynamics of these families and how they relate to each other, because that bonus epilogue was, like, the sweetest thing I've ever seen. The next book I touched upon in my thematic TBR video was Mighty by Emily Giuseppe. And now that I have finished this book, I can talk about it a little bit more. So this book is a series of essays that is about disabled superheroes. And as I was saying in the video that comes out on the 18th, I loved how this book of essays tackled my two favorite things, disability awareness and superheroes, because I think that deep down inside, everybody with a disability is a superhero in their own way. And earlier this year, I read the series by Marissa Meyer that's about superheroes, and I would say that if I had a superhero talent, I would want to be a superhero skill or whatever. I would choose invisibility, so I could like walk through walls and stuff, because I think that would be fun. Renegades, that was the name of the series by Marissa Meyer that I read earlier in the wintertime, which I gave 4 stars to. Mighty got 4.5 stars. Another memoir I wanted to talk about is Prince Harry's memoir, Spare. I had to stop reading this book at 65%. I usually love reading stuff about the royal family because I'm like into the gossip about everything that's going on between them. But so the first section of his memoir is basically about Princess Diana's death and how he coped with that. And like, of course, I was 12 years old when Princess Diana died, and I remember that day so well. I remember being in my parents' bedroom watching her funeral on the world news, and I remember just feeling so sad for his family. Like, my heart broke all over again when I read the chapter about when he found out his mother died. But like, first of all, I think this book needed a much better editor, because the chapters were choppy, and like chapters would start halfway down a page, which I can't stand because it really breaks up the flow of the narrative. Other books have done that too, and I can't stand that. And Prince Harry just comes off as sort of whiny, so that's why I really couldn't finish his book. And the second I couldn't even get to the part where he meets Meghan Markle, because the part about his education and military history was just so dull, and that's why I had to stop reading. His book got 2.5 to 3 stars. The Bear and the Nightingale I just talked about. Another book that I read was The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. So this book came out in like the 80s and early 90s, and it's about 2 groups of teenage gangs who live somewhere in the United States. I don't remember where exactly, but a famous quote from this book is "Stay gold, Pony Boy." Pony Boy is like one of the main characters who's younger, and there is a scene that made me so sad about when Johnny, the main guy in one of the gangs, there are 2 gangs in this book called the Greasers and the Socks. The Socks are like the privileged people, and the Greasers are like the not so privileged people who are like the underdogs. And Pony Boy is like probably 13 or something, and then Johnny is like 17. So I think so. So this book talks a lot about gang violence and also bullying, and I was able to connect to the characters because when I was younger, I was bullied. But what is impressive about this book is that the author, S.E. Hinton, wrote this book when she was 15, and like maybe that's why I could relate to the book so well, because it talks about bullying. I was bullied in middle school and high school when I was like 13 through 16. So, but it's impressive that a 15-year-old girl wrote that book. The Outsiders was recently turned into a Broadway musical that won the Tony Award. So now I really want to watch the movie and then listen to the Broadway cast recording of The Outsiders. And I gave The Outsiders 4 stars. The next book I read last month was The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison, which is a short story about a slave during the time of the Underground Railroad. And Toni Morrison's books are so engaging. A book I read last summer by her that I really loved, which is about a similar type of topic, is Beloved. And I gave that book 4 stars, as well as The Bluest Eye. And the next book I want to read by Toni Morrison is Sula, because that was recommended in Jack Edwards' recent video about Brat summer recommendations. The next book I wanted to mention is called The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. This book is written by the same guy who wrote Under the Whispering Door, which I want to read next. It's about a caseworker who works in, like, taking care of magical children and making sure they're not getting into too much trouble. So think of, like, Harry Potter, but, like, kids who are in group homes instead of who go to a magical school. So the kids who live in the orphanage that Linus visits to check on the welfare of the kids are so sweet, and I really love them. And my favorite kid, I think, his name was Theo, and he was really cute. So I gave House in the Cerulean Sea 4.5 stars because I love the setting. I loved the kids in the orphanage and how adorable they were. Yeah. What is the next book? Did I cover everything or did I miss something? Oh, the next book I recently finished reading was This Is How You Lose the Time War by Elmore Al-Sarafi and Max Gladstone. And this book is set during a war, in an unknown country, and it's about 2 people who are in a gay romance, and the book is written in letters, kind of like Divine Rivals. And I really like how this story is told in letters, and it's a really creative way to build up relationships. And like, I think this book was written like during Vietnam War, but if this was written in a war of today, I feel like most of their conversation would be email or text messages. And I would like to see a book like that, like a book that is similarly written to This Is How We Lose the Time War, but with more modern day technology instead of writing letters like emails or text messages. But I really loved the writing style in this book and how it was set through letters. And I would actually highly recommend it. A couple of other booktubers have talked about this. I think Riley read it. I think Sarah Without an H has read it. I think Destiny or Sarah or Haley or Rachel Catherine has talked about it. I can't remember if all 4 of them have or if one of them or 2 of them has. I would have to go back and rewatch their videos. And the last book I wanted to talk about is A Grave Robbery by Deanna Raybourn. Deanna Raybourn is the same author who wrote Killers of a Certain Age, which I read in January, and which I will be reading again soon. And A Grave Robbery is the last book in the Veronica Speedwell series. And I am holding off on giving a thorough review of this book until I read the whole series. And I'm reading the books out of order because I started with the last book. So now I have to read the rest of the series. So stay tuned for my full thoughts on this series at a later date. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you guys have a great week ahead and stay tuned for my next video on August 18th. See you later.